G'day legends, I hope that you're doing really well and having a great Thursday. It's almost the end of the week and we're almost free for the weekend. Anyway, today we're going to talk about some drones, we're going to talk about Poland, we're going to talk about Romania and drones as well, some small boats. We're going to look at some drone footage, we're going to look at some strike footage, a little bit of everything, talk about some missiles as well. But I just want to start with the most popular interview I've done is with a lad, Justin, who fought with Azov Battalion, but a Westerner who went over to fight with them. And many were concerned about his health when he returned to the States, as he'd been through a lot. If you'd like to see the interview, I believe it's called I'm the Only One Left. I'll link it here somewhere anyway. But he's doing really well. I actually keep in touch with about 90% of the people of which I've interviewed pretty much day to day, and they help me out with some stuff a lot as well. Now, I also heard back from my drone guy about what we saw then on top of the Russian bomber aircraft. And he said, on first blush, I can't think of a good reason for this. Another version of a cope cage, perhaps. The cardboard drones made in Oz by SciPac, I think that's the spelling, are basically flying claymores. So I'm not sure how that helps against the projectiles or any other decent warhead. This could be beneficial if there is an optical trigger based on visual or thermal contrast or a minimum area of reflectivity. It might give some erroneous laser rangefinder readings if that is used for a trigger. It could also be an obscuration technique to delay actual target acquisition if the drones have to be manually aimed during the final run-in, especially if there are dummy targets or non-operational aircraft also visible. This is all just my opinion. I've never heard of something like this happening before. And this is speculation about what the hell are we actually seeing on the top of those aircraft. There's been multiple strikes against Rostov in Russia as well by Ukrainian drones. So, of course, we're talking down here. Here is Rostov, a long way from Ukrainian held territory, about, I believe, 170 kilometers to the nearest area, 180, but I'm probably off on this by at least 10 Ks. So about 170 Ks pushing into Russian territory and striking many targets there. Now, we know Rostov is where Russia's Southern Military Command headquarters is. Now, as well, there is some very interesting footage has come out. Now, I hadn't actually seen this before, and this is a Ukrainian suicide kamikaze drone then actually chasing down a Russian Ka-52 helicopter here. So we can tell that's the chopper. You see the two props, and he just misses it here. He's close, like there. That is very close. And then chasing it down there, but it just doesn't look like it has the speed to actually capture it. We know these choppers are very, very fast, and it seems to maybe get caught in like rotor wash as it comes here, comes behind it. It seems to pull off, but incredible video, and I'm sure that we will at some point see these actually hit and take down something like this as well. Now, we have seen as well footage of when the British Challenger 2 actually got then taken out. So we're looking down here. Now, it's said to be by a Cornet missile. And I will mute this. And that's where then it was struck, and it's been geolocated to then. This is the same one we saw in the video the other day. Now, as we know, when something like this gets killed, there's like 50 different photos released from different angles and people claim it is that, but it's still the same one. There's only the one that has been then hit. Now, this has been then geolocated to here, just on this intersection we see, not really an intersection, but where these two paths then meet. Now, I have this then, of course, onto the deep state map. Now, you can't put grids into this, and ISW took away their ability to search grids. That was the best thing ISW had. You can't go forward and back on dates in ISW, but you could plot grids. Now, can't do that, but it was just on this intersection just here. Now, this is still a little bit away from the very, very front. Now, we're not exactly sure when that was taken out, but if it was only like 2 days ago, the front line, let's go back to where the front line was 2 days ago. So it was there. It hasn't really changed too much significantly, at least in that location itself. So it was a fairly long shot for then a Cornet missile, saying that's what it actually then was. So let's come down into grey zone somewhere. So we're talking 3 Ks, maybe 4. We don't know where exactly it came from. Could also be artillery strike as well. We're not 100% sure that it was Cornet, but Cornets, it says on here 8 to 10, but 5.5, maybe 3.5, 4 on daylight. So we don't really know. We know max range is one thing. Like if you look at the max range of like an 84, I can tell you that the absolute max of that, you're not having that much luck hitting with that as well. So we've seen more footage come out as well about small boats with the Ukrainian forces. Now we saw Sarah Carrillo sharing about raising money for more small boats, and we've often speculated that Ukraine could use small boat tactics in more places around Ukraine, especially to cross somewhere on the Dnipro River down here, or maybe into Crimea, maybe into another bank on Kherson down here. We're not really sure here. And we do know that from Novokhovka basically up has dramatically less water in it than it did have. We have seen about a bit over a year ago, we did see Ukraine attempt some crossings across here to then hit the nuclear power plant. That is confirmed because I know guys that did that, and yeah, that went across there. And we have seen crossings by Ukrainian special forces also then down into Crimea as well. So let's have a watch of this video, and I think we will see more and more of this. So we do see right in the beginning here, we do see an American patch on a shoulder here as well. Now, to my eye, this is only training. You can see someone already on the shore here, but as well, very interesting. And I think we'll see more and more of that. I don't know exactly where that is. It could have been outside of Ukraine conducting this training as well. Now, the new Ukrainian defense minister has been put into action as well. Now, Defense of Ukraine has said this: "For me, this war did not start in 2022, and not even in 2014. For my family and the Crimean Tatar people, the war with Russia began several centuries ago, when Moscow first occupied my native Crimea. I was born after my family had been deported, and as a child lived through the hardships brought about by Russian colonialism, which attempted to make indigenous Crimean Tatar people feel as though they were aliens on their own land. They did not succeed back then, and they will never succeed. Our main goal today is to win the war." So here, of course, is Rustem Umerov. Many people have said this is a fantastic decision for Ukraine. We know he is in charge of a lot of state projects, and for the role of what he will be doing as defense minister could be very good. Now, people, and I've sort of thought this myself, well, the defense minister isn't a militaryman. Well, that's not uncommon. Australia's defense minister isn't ex-military currently either as well, to my belief. Now, at least I'm pretty sure, but they don't need to be. It's more of a political position that then you're not making any tactical decisions per se. You're more trying to procure weapons and such, at least in his role now. So the MOD has also then released this. Oh, we'd like to look at these because apparently I'm a Russian propagandist that read off intel updates from the Brits. Now, Russia's new school year has begun with a new curriculum incorporating both military skills and the Kremlin's view of the history of Ukraine. At least everywhere in the world is teaching complete propaganda to kids at school, and we're no different to that. Anyway, Russian President Vladimir Putin personally held an open lesson with 30 school children on the first day of term. Topics in the updated national history exam include Crimean reunification with Russia and the special military operation in Ukraine. Russia's parliament approved the curriculum last year. One element, the basics of life safety, is aimed towards senior students and includes a basic military training module. This will include handling Kalashnikovs and use of hand grenades, uncrewed aerial vehicles, drones, operations, and battlefield first aid. Pupils may also be visited by Ukraine veterans. Throwing hand grenades even with like soldiers is always a little bit fucking wild. That would be fucking wild. Anyway, the new curriculum serves three objectives: to indoctrinate students with the Kremlin rationale for the SMO, instill students with martial mindset, and reduce training timelines for onwards mobilization and deployment. The introduction of UAV operations indicates their evolving importance on the battlefield and the lessons learned about these systems directly from the conflict in Ukraine. So we know how important drones are in this war, that they are the thing that soldiers really fear the most here and coming, and the thing that they're asking for the most here. Now, we do know, if we compare this against like West and schooling, it's very different. Russia do have more of a military training sort of mindset in schools. We have seen that a lot. Well, the curriculum is new, but the actual like militarized stuff isn't that new. They're a lot different country to what we may be used to, say, over here. Now, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Kyiv on an unannounced visit, his first time in about a year. Now, he has announced another $1 billion USD in aid, which this includes HIMARS missile launch systems, Javelin weapons, Abrams tanks, which he said the first 10 will be in mid-September, and we're on the 7th today, so really in about a week we expect to see Abrams, not on the front line, but expect to at least see them in country. But interesting as well, the depleted uranium shells. We have seen Russia kick up a stink about these shells going into Ukraine, although Russia does have its own uranium shells. Now, Antony Blinken has said in the ongoing counter-offensive, progress has accelerated in the past few weeks, which we have seen. This new assistance will help sustain it and build further momentum. Now, he says there the momentum. That is one thing I think which is definitely important in this. We tend to see a lot of ground made and then slow, then a lot of ground, then slow. And this is because of hitting minefields, hitting a lot of resistance, hitting built-up works, but that momentum is going to be very, very important. We may see that momentum build as Ukraine, let's bring up the things, as they break through here, we may see more and more momentum, but we do know momentum is incredibly important on the battlefield, and we know about, the end, maybe start of October, mid-October, it does start getting wet in Ukraine. So there has been doubts of wherever they get to, how much more movement will there actually be. They really need to get a foothold somewhere like Tokmak to have more fire control over the south of their country by the time that gets through, or else Russia will build up more defensive works and it'll be harder to then hit logistical hubs. We have seen Ukraine have extended range with their drones even into Russia, and the HIMARS have really changed where Russia can put some of the logistical hubs, and those are still a very effective weapon on the front line of Ukraine. Now, we can't not talk about this. There's been a very terrible event unfold in Constantinivka in the Donetsk Oblast at the market. So let's have a look at where this is. So, of course, here is Bakhmut, here's Kramatorsk, and then this is Constantinivka. So still very close to the frontline area here. You'd still hear a lot of shelling. You're still at threat of a lot coming in and out of here. You're only 20 kilometres away from where the frontline is. Now, it's been confirmed at the time that 17 civilians have been confirmed killed and 34 injured. Now, like with any strike like this, there's an instant back and forward as to whose missile it was, what the intent is, who's to blame, whatever. There's always that back and forward. Now, Ukraine officially says that it was a Russian S-300 missile used in a ground attack mode. Now, Russian sources will claim that it was a Ukrainian air defense S-300 or a misfired Storm Shadow or a HARM. I've seen a lot of different things claimed there. Now, with the footage, and you can see the footage on my Telegram if you'd like, and there's a lot of photos which are very, very graphic as well, which of course I won't show here, but if you'd like to see them, they are online. But with the footage, that people are saying you can see the direction the missile comes, and you can hear some things as well, and they're using this for evidence to say who it was. Now, saying that in the footage, you can hear a bang, and that the people turn when they hear this bang. Now, people saying that they turn to then the northwest as they hear something, and about 2 seconds later, then the explosion on the ground. Now, of course, this is being used as evidence, saying that it was a Ukrainian missile. Now, I will say that none of this, at least in my mind, is beyond reasonable doubt as evidence that this bang, like this is still a frontline area. This could still just be other artillery. But with all of this, people will pick and choose evidence in favour of supporting their narrative or their biases. And personally, I believe that so much media and official sources have been so unreliable and just lied about things that it has opened the door to narratives and propaganda that so much is like the boy who cried wolf, that people are like, well, I'm not going to believe anything, because if you lied once, why wouldn't you lie again, and it's been like that with sources, so people more easily then believe these narratives or propaganda as people have a different view across from what the mainstream may then have. But all I know is that this is a terrible event, and that the 17 innocent civilians have been caught up with is absolutely horrific, and that ultimately Russia is responsible for this attack, regardless of what missile fell on Constantinivka. But I do believe with the world's funding that's going into Ukraine, absolutely more needs to be done to protect civilians in these frontline areas. Now, I want to go over a few more things. Now, one of the big ones, speaking of drones, Romania has somewhat backflipped on them categorically denying that a drone fell in Romania. So we have this come out from the Ministry of National Defence. This is their then press information. The Minister of National Defence, Angel Telvar, travelled today, September 6th, to the localities of this and Chilia Vesh in Tulkia country, where he had discussions with the citizens and local authorities in the vicinity of the attacks carried out by the Russian Federation on the Ukrainian Donbas port civil infrastructure about the issues they faced on the last days. In this afternoon, Minister Tilvar has planned to visit Galati City. Also, the team led by Minister of National Defence, which included the Chief of Defence Staff, General Daniel Prescu, and the Chief of the Air Force Staff, Lieutenant General. This bloke gathered information about the specific situation in the visited areas and informed local authorities that additional measures will be taken to strengthen the monitoring and security capabilities of Romania's airspace at its borders. The Ministry of National Defence, MAPN, team also visited the vicinity of the village of Pluru, where the investigative teams of the MAPN discovered in the evening of September 5th elements that could be associated with drone fragments. Specialists sent by MAPN to the scene collected samples that will undergo technical expertise and determine their origin and characteristics. The conclusions drawn by MAPN scientists following the completion of the investigations will be communicated to the public with the utmost rapidity. So, this is being released different to what a lot of people are saying. This is like 100% they've found these, they're saying it's Russian stuff. This is where you need to read what the fucking thing says. So that could be associated with drone fragments. They could be. And samples will still undergo technical expertise. Now, likely is it? Yeah, we saw that the explosion. We've seen footage of, drones in that area. We know Russia is targeting right in and around that area that borders there. So most likely it is, but until we have these technical samples actually back that they've collected, we won't 100% know. But then the Romanian president has said this. If it is confirmed that these elements belong to a Russian drone, such a situation would be completely inadmissible and a serious violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Romania, a NATO ally. We are on alert and in constant contact with our NATO allies. Now, will this invoke Article 5? No. Like we said yesterday, this is not a breach. Intent is what invokes Article 5, that it wasn't targeting Romania, it was targeting Ukraine. Although it has landed there, and that's still fucking very serious, it's the intent. It's like the Ukrainian missile that crossed into Poland. There was no intent to hit Poland and kill those two people either. So, terrible situation there. But Romania, this could spark up more support for defense along NATO's border, but also support then into Ukraine as well. And a lot of these Russian missile attacks completely backfire on Russia. Like the one in Constantinivka, this one, all these other ones, it completely backfires because all it does is makes them look further like the bad guys, and also then bolsters support from NATO into Ukraine. So I've actually often thought about this. Well, like if they didn't do those long range strikes that have hit areas, would there be as much media? Like if there was less media coverage, that would actually do better for Russia's war, I guess. Anyway, before we have a look at the maps, I want to talk a little bit about Poland. Now, this bloke here, who is maybe the scariest man I've ever seen in my life, this is Polish General Regiment. I can never pronounce anything Polish. Talking about if North Korea would actually prepare to sell weapons to Russia without the agreement of China. We know North Korea and China. China has North Korea very much in its back pocket. I don't believe North Korea is strong enough, also free, to make such an offer. So maybe it is testing our determination, attention, and political will. But what is even more important is what China says about this than the North Korean leadership. So what will China actually say about these weapons, this transfer, these deals being made between Russia and North Korea, said to be at a meeting between Putin and Kim Jong-un. Now, continues, also predicted that Russia would try and create a crisis in the next month's Polish election, but gave no details in public, as we've heard rumours that Russia has had influence in other elections before. Anyway, he says, Russian was permanent war footing and is very much active in Poland, looking for some gaps in the system, trying to interfere with the media. Now here talking about not only spies, but other sort of partisans, like pro-Russian people working in Poland. We have seen like a number of Wagner stickers and stuff put up around Poland as well. Now, he also warned that Ukraine lost the war and Belarus went further into Russia's orbit. Poland would find that limiting defence spending to 5% of its gross domestic product and standing army of 300,000 strong would not be enough. If we lose credibility as NATO, as civilization, China is watching. So this is the big game. And this is exactly what we talked about the other day when Mikhailo Podolyak was saying about why is NATO building up and not just sending everything into Ukraine. Words to that effect is China. That's the big game here, is still China. And if other countries get drawn into, the words he uses, into the orbit of Russia, Belarus. Now, referring to repeated Russian threats of nuclear weapons and the stationing of Russian tactical nuclear weapons, he has said, it looks like we're dealing with the gangsters, crazy bad guys. Everyone has gone to the park smoking cigars. The gangsters were putting guns on the table and wearing Panama t-shirts and saying, well, I've got a gun, but I left mine at home. And my wife does not like the word. And this is talking about, of course, the nuclear weapons in Belarus. NATO is a nuclear treaty. It should be much more proactive and stronger to the Russians. In the 70s and 80s, 30% of B-52 bombers were flying permanently and had nuclear weapons with pilots ready to act. Today, we have a challenge to say the word, B-61, referring to the US thermonuclear gravity bomb. So let's change narratives. So what's wrong with us? Russia is still the same, and we still have a situation in a neighbouring country where Russia is saying publicly it is putting nuclear systems in Belarus and what we're doing in our Panama t-shirt. I don't want to escalate too much, but what is wrong with our vocabulary? NATO is a nuclear organisation, full stop. They're saying that, of course, NATO is a large nuclear power and should have more presence in around NATO as well, now that Russia is moving nuclear weapons into Belarus and, of course, putting their new Sarmat rockets on ICBMs on combat readiness as well. And we know Poland, they have been the biggest supporter of Ukraine and really sort of itching for, even going in as well. So many rumours, people hit me up about, is it true Poland's going in? And Poland can't go into this war without, really NATO's consent. But if Poland wasn't part of NATO, they 100% would be in on this war. You can just see the way this general talks about it compared to other generals around the world. You can see the big difference there. Questioned whether NATO had decided what to do in an attack on NATO territories mounted by Wagner Group, including whether it would invoke Article 5 self-defense clause by attributing the attack to Russia. And he asked, who is Wagner Group today? Is it a national action by Russia, or, as the Russian Defense Minister says, it's a private military company? Is it enough for Article 5? Now, we've talked a lot about this. What is Wagner? Is it an arm of the Russian military, or is it a private company? Because if it's an arm of the Russian military, then, of course, it can enact these articles. But if it is a private company, which Russia wanted to be, funded by the state, but under private, so you get that plausible deniability with what is going on, they can use it in different aspects around the world, well, that's what it is. They need to make what then actually is Wagner PMC. He said the issue was very sensitive for Poland because we have no time and no space. We're facing a direct border with Kaliningrad and Belarus. This is not a Cold War 2.0 anymore. So what is he then talking about now? I think the threat of Wagner Group in Belarus having any push across the Suwalki Gap between Poland and Lithuania, I think it's blown out of proportion, but we see the Baltic states putting a lot of soldiers and Poland putting a lot of soldiers along these borders. So they must be very serious about this. They must have more intel on this than I, because they're deploying a shitload of people up in Lithuania, Poland into this area that people were saying maybe, and this was before Prigozhin got killed. We don't really know what Wagner's actually doing at the moment, but after the mutiny, when they moved into Belarus, could they try and push across the Suwalki Gap here, cutting off Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania from mainland EU, NATO, and push it across to Kaliningrad, another part of Russia here. That was what was spoken about and then speculated. Could that actually be a possibility? But realistically, if Wagner tried that, they would just get smoked with whatever Wagner have. They just don't have enough people or enough stuff to actually do that. They're a private military company. They're not a state army. They're not a full thing at the time, especially because that is NATO. NATO would have no problem whacking them from there. Now, we are going to have a look over the maps, and I will say that not that much has changed. But of course, we have Ukraine and the capital of Kyiv here. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 14. Of course, this being Crimea down here, the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov. Here is Russia, Belarus, Poland, and Romania down in here. So let's first go into where we have seen a lot of the fighting recently, to the south of Orikhiv, around Robotyne. As people are saying, the Tokmak front. Now, we haven't seen any change in here. You'll just see this green, but the green just means Ukraine's held it for more than 2 weeks. That it doesn't mean any advancement here, but we know there is a lot of fighting going on in this area. So let's just have a look between the ISW and the ISW then yesterday, as it does show a slight change in here. So what we saw yesterday was these were the advances in the dark blue yesterday, which we can see across to today. They have held then these advances. So this part, and up here is being confirmed Ukrainian gain. The only gain I can see on the ISW today by Ukraine is this small little blue bit into here, up further into where these tank traps are in the defensive works. And in Robotyne, War Mapper's only map update today was that a little bit more ground to the west of Robotyne, being this part here, was made by the Ukrainian forces as well. And they put it as a minor gain, but that was all they put in. So we do know Ukraine did make some territory around Robotyne there, but that is the only real update we can see. So more down into these defensive works. So we also then do have this map here by the Rybar Russian sources, showing these gains around Robotyne. Now, we do know for the first time that official Russian accounts have said that Robotyne is under Ukrainian control, but we do know that this area, although there may be Ukrainian soldiers and no Russian soldiers in Robotyne, it's still very, very grey, and there's a lot of fighting going on, a lot of shelling, a lot of bloody everything. But it does show this push into then these defensive works, and I think this shows pretty much the exact same in most areas that then this other deep state map then shows. Now, some of the defensive works are slightly different map to map, but we'll just might see where these two come down. This is then said to be this one. This little bit out here is here. So then it crosses back down, and you can see these main 2 works, being these 2, are also then into the grey zone through to where Verbove is here. So it's not showing too much different. It is showing that they have had a breach into those then defensive works and making ground. But between Robotyne and Verbove, the deep state is definitely showing that Ukraine have more of a southerly push than the Rybar is showing. So if we just line up where Novoporovka is here, where these defensive works are here, where they start to turn up, which is this is the turn, that this is still shown in Russian controlled, where of course here is shown within Ukrainian controlled territory. So different maps show different bits and pieces. Now, where we are going to go to next is we're just going to go, of course, to then this area here near Urozhany, Starmorsky, where we saw really the beginnings of this counter-offensive push down here and hasn't reached yet the main lines of defense. But like Syriac said yesterday, that the rumors that Ukraine was pushing into Zavatny in here was false, that where they're really pushing is Novodonetsky and Novomayorsky to then the east. Now, this is actually then backed up by what Rybar just posted today. So we see, of course, these arrows of where Ukraine tend to be pushing, and are pushing at Novodonetsky, Novomayorsky here too. Now, it does show, let's move across, slightly different. So Novodonetsky does show up to then this reservoir here is still under Russian control, where here it does show that it is in grey zone, that Ukraine have crossed over this small bit of reservoir here. Of course, this is where it is. So it does show a slightly bit more ground, but we know Deep State is very pro-Ukrainian and Rybar is pro-Russian. So this is why we line up different bits and pieces of these maps to get more of an idea. Now, the ISW has had this map as well. Now, this is Nevelsky here, so let's actually have a look at where that is. We'll pick up from Starmorsky, Novodonetsky area, and then we'll push up past Mariinka, and then we'll see Vodany Opitny here. So it's just then to the south of Avdiivka. Now, let's have a look at what ISW is then saying. So here is Nevelsky, that it's saying that Ukraine had more of a push out to the west coming into Nevelsky in here. Now, we can't line this up perfectly, but you can get an idea that it is somewhere about in here where they are talking that Ukraine had then that advancement. This is the reservoir, and we see then this is the border dots through here. So somewhere just down in this area. Ukraine is said to have had some gains by then the ISW map. Now, we are going to push. We did see Ukraine have some major advancements in around Klishkivka area, of course, to the south of Bakhmut. So let's go to yesterday. It's Klishkivka and Rivka. Now, we do know that Klishkivka is 80 or 90% under Ukrainian control. They're not having too much success in Avdiivka, but what people are saying is they're now trying to sort of flank, go to the south of both Klishkivka and Avdiivka and get more control that way. So we have seen this push right here to the south then of Klishkivka. Let's bring up the satellite. Satellite hates me. Come on. Here we go. So to the south, then pushing down around through these paddocks, is open terrain here, and eventually we may see more of a try back onto Bakhmut as well. Now, let's push further up to the only other change we see then on the maps into then this area. Now, we spoke about this over the other maps on the last couple of days. So we're talking into the west of Svatov. So let's see here to then here. So we did see Russia make some gain. This is this paddock here from this tree line through this paddock and push back into this tree line here, pushing the Ukrainians back in that area. So we do see a lot of fighting in around this area, and this area, of course, has been very fluid up right here. Now, we haven't seen any changes up or down the map. The daily Ukraine map update does show no changes anywhere up and down the map either, and this is all the maps that I could find online that I would typically normally use. Anyway, legends, hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I hope you've got big plans coming up for the weekend. Have a great day. If you'd like to support me, there's links down below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. I'll speak tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.